World geography. Southwest Asia. The oil economy. Here are the learning objectives. 1. How is petroleum located and then processed for consumption? 2. How does OPEC establish the price of oil on world markets? And what limits their ability to control prices? 3. What challenges exist for the economies of oil exporting nations? Oil and natural gas. Overview. The oil fields of Southwest Asia contain about 1/2 of all the petroleum reserves in the world. Petroleum is the source of gasoline for automobiles, the source of heating oil for homes, and it's also the foundation of many chemicals that are used to make everything from fertilizers to plastics. Petroleum formation. Petroleum and natural gas deposits, they were formed millions of years ago. Now, natural gas often accompanies petroleum underneath the ground. Microscopic plants and animals, they lived and died in the waters of the ancient sea, and then they sank to the bottom, mixing with the sand and the mud. Over thousands of years, pressure and heat transformed the material into hydrocarbons, and this formed the chemical basis of petroleum and natural gas. Petroleum and rocks. Petroleum and natural gas, they do not exist in large pools beneath the ground. They're instead trapped inside the rocks. The rocks contain microscopic pores which store petroleum and natural gas. A barrier of non-porous rock above a petroleum deposit, this prevents the oily substance and the natural gas from moving out of the rock and escaping to the surface. Early exploration. Industrialization and the popularity of the automobile, this made petroleum a valuable resource. The first Southwest Asian oil discovery was in 1908 in Persia, now called Iran. In 1938, oil companies found more fields in the Arabian Peninsula and under the Persian Gulf. The world's largest oil fields are in Saudi Arabia, on the eastern edge of the Rub al-Khali Desert. Petroleum transportation. Unprocessed petroleum, or crude oil, is pumped from the ground, and then it has to be moved via pipeline to a refinery, where it's converted into useful products. Pipelines also transport crude oil or petroleum to ocean ports, where the oil is picked up by supertankers and then moved around the world, perhaps to other places for processing. Here's a diagram of processing petroleum. You can see they drill and then they store it. They either pump it to the oil refinery for processing, or they can pump it onto ships, which take it to other refineries in the world to be processed. Oil spills. Of course, moving petroleum around means there's a risk of spills. Buried pipelines help reduce this danger. Ocean-going supertankers, though, they operate in shallow and narrow waterways, and there's often a risk of collision or running aground. Nowadays, supertankers have double hulls so that a minor accident doesn't result in an oil spill. Price and flow of oil. Oil exporting goals. Oil exporting countries, they depend upon the sale of petroleum to support their economies. The goal, or their goal, is to ensure that a steady supply of oil flows out of their countries, and in return for this supply, of course, they expect to be paid. OPEC. To guarantee global supply and the national income of countries that export oil, several oil exporting countries have joined together. They began joining together in 1960, and they formed the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, known as OPEC. OPEC is a cartel. It's a group of suppliers who act together to fix the price and the output and the conditions of sale. OPEC has 12 member nations. 6 of the members are Southwest Asian countries, but the organization also includes 6 oil producers from outside the region. Here are the members of OPEC around the world. Steady prices. The goal, of course, of OPEC is to maintain steady prices. For instance, if too much oil is offered for sale at the same time, then there's going to be competition among buyers to purchase the oil they need. If there's a lot of oil available for sale, then prices are going to drop. There's going to be a sale, and everyone's profits will decline. So OPEC doesn't want to offer too much oil, but they don't want to offer too little either. If there's too little oil being produced, that's going to lead to an increase in prices. Also, people will use less petroleum. They'll drive less. They'll take less vacations. Won't use as much. Too pricey. People use less oil if demand falls and the profits decline. So OPEC's goal is to kind of get it just right. The limits of OPEC. 2 realities limit OPEC's ability to control prices. The first reality is that large oil reserves in Alaska, the North Sea, between United Kingdom and Norway, oil reserves in Canada, the Gulf of Mexico, and Russia, these countries are not members of OPEC, and so they can reduce OPEC's influence by selling oil at whatever price they want. Also, even within OPEC, its members don't always act as a united group. And these were the oil reserves in 2011 found around the world. You'll notice that countries like Canada and Russia have quite a bit of oil reserves. Oil importing countries. The United States, Japan, many European countries, they're huge oil importers. And they have an interest in securing an unimpeded flow of oil around the world. Of course, the United States has discovered the benefits of fracking, which produces more oil, and so now the United States is starting to turn into an oil exporting country itself. Oil wealth and diversification. Future challenges. Petroleum is a finite resource. It's not going to last forever. To promote greater economic growth, oil-rich nations, they have to use their profits to modernize their infrastructure. Also, they should use the profits to develop their agricultural, mineral, and water resources. Countries like Saudi Arabia, they encourage citizens to earn higher education degrees and develop useful technical skills. Modernizing infrastructure. Part of modernizing infrastructure has meant that Saudi Arabia has built new roads in rural areas, extensive irrigation networks. They've also built facilities to store agricultural products, and they've constructed desalinization plants. Other nations in the region, they've spent the oil money on constructing airports, shopping malls, and port facilities. Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, they've constructed information technology systems to serve business better. Developing resources. Nations with the finite resource of oil, they have to diversify their economies. They can't put all their eggs in one basket. The arid conditions in the area, they limit the production of food crops. And so they really have a need to develop agriculture. In order to support this need to develop agriculture, governments have built dams to trap scarce water, and they've dug deep wells to tap the water in the underground reservoirs. Nowadays, Saudi Arabia is able to meet the domestic demand for dairy products, red meat, poultry, and eggs, and wheat. That's quite an accomplishment in a desert nation. Other nations have developed their mineral resources. Oman has revived its copper industry and its chromium mines. Human resources. Southwest Asian nations also are developing their human resources, the skills and the talents of their people. They can do this by providing higher education and technology training. Also, one thing about the shortage of qualified workers in the region is that some opportunities are beginning to open up for women. The end. Thank you for your attention.